another one. I want you to react to Steve Young. Here's Steve Young on KMBR.
I'm not familiar with KMBR. What is that?
KMBR is a radio station in Northern California.
Well, everyone in February.
Steve Young's awesome. He's on with Tolbert and Copeland every week. It's probably the best radio segment there is. And here it is right now.
But how do you make sure? And I think that things are going to be harder this year. That's the problem of running the table like they did last year and dominating like they did. Well, everyone in February, the coaches come together. Who should we study? Well, I think the 49ers, because that was something that we got to figure out. And then they make it harder. And so this year is harder, and it's going to be harder. And so now we can't do the same things we did last year. We have to innovate. He has to be better, because defense are now, because they're getting a beat on Brock. Brock is somebody that wants to decipher the play really quickly, stay ahead of the data, get the ball out fast. That's why Brandon is such an important part of the puzzle. It's so terrible and tragic for him. I pray he gets fully healthy again. But his ability to get open quickly is fed into Brock's superpower. And so when those things don't happen, people aren't open right away, and he's deciphering through. And I was like, where do I go? And now he starts to scramble. That's not his best thing. He can do it, but it's not his best or favorite thing. And we've got to figure out how to go win a championship now, not win a division, not hang around.
Yeah. Okay, so a little bit of Steve Young. The one thing that he said there that really strikes as accurate and true is that NFL teams spend the offseason studying something. These guys, they choose things to study. And Steve's right. They study the teams that are on top. They study the offenses that are prevalent and the offenses that are having success and the defenses that are having success and are prevalent. I mean, everybody studies everybody, but especially studying offenses, because there's always innovation. There's always change. There's always different wrinkles. And some of the best offensive minds, Kyle Shanahan is among them, are oftentimes on the cutting edge of some of the changes, and they don't happen for no reason. They usually happen for some reason. So the teams do spend a ton of time studying. And I would imagine they did spend a lot of time studying the 49ers. And do teams have a book on the 49ers? Well, it's interesting. I think, Dieter, you were on literally right after me talking about the same stuff about Nick Wright the other day. I'm not sure if you were you?
The Brock take, yeah. This is
the
Tuesday.
Brock take. And this was the deal where, it's like the Kyle Van Noy, thing. Was Kyle Van Noy right? Kyle Van Noy said after the Ravens beat the Niners on Christmas that it wasn't just a win, but it was a blueprint for the rest of the NFL on how to beat the 49ers and Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan. And he claimed, oh my God, we've got the blueprint. We didn't just get the win, we showed everybody. Well, I'm starting to think that maybe he might be onto something, because Purdy pre that game, 18-3, 68% completion, 47 touchdowns, 11 turnovers. Purdy since Christmas night, 6-6, 16 touchdowns, 14 turnovers. And as I said, 6-6. So 63% completion percentage, down from 68. So then the question is, well, what the heck is the blueprint, right? What did the Ravens actually do, right? And I discounted it early. Why? Because I look at it as personnel. The Ravens took advantage of the condensed formations and brought slot corner blitzes off the edges because they could get home in 4 steps and cause the quarterback to throw the ball early. And then they just dropped their great, really ball hawking. They probably got the best ball hawking middle defenders, or they did last year.
Best linebacker, Queen, 1, 2. You get Hamilton, great safeties, Stone, great corners. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I mean, they drafted their middle guy, and they played Humphrey as a corner outside. I mean, in the slot, they didn't go with their slot guy that was getting burned prior to that. So they made some
Hamilton was
adjustments.
immense.
They changed stuff up. They dropped guys into the middle of the field, and they read the quarterback's eyes, and he got some turnovers. One of them was tipped up into the air and lucky, so that one was just random. But he did turn the ball over that night, and he didn't play well. Okay, is that the blueprint? Well, I didn't think so. But then when I watched Niners Chiefs, I thought that was more about the Ravens having great personnel in the middle of the field. But if you watch Niners Chiefs, there were a couple of plays. I mean, we saw some Purdy missed with Ayuk, and it looked like they didn't were on the same page. And then, the turnover on the ball to Ronnie Bell, looked like either a misread by Brock or he thought it was, maybe for a second he thought they were in some kind of a zone, or he thought he was throwing with anticipation.
Right.
He didn't put the ball on the receiver. He kind of threw it. He tried to throw him open like he does so many times, but it was man to man, and it just didn't work out. But one thing that was noticeable is that there was a couple examples where the Chiefs just had the ability to play inside leverage or outside leverage, and they played inside leverage, forcing it, for having the defender inside, basically challenging the 49ers to play outside the numbers.
Mhm.
And knowing their trend is that they like to throw the in-breaking routes, especially down the field. You don't see them throw down the field outside the numbers a lot. It's a lot down the field, in the middle of the field. That's kind of their tendency.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I mean, is that, was that the Ravens' plan, that
No.
kind of look for the ball in the middle of the field, anticipate the 49ers throwing the ball in the middle of the field? I mean, what do you think?
The blueprint got out on October 23rd, 2022, well before Kyle Van Noy or the Baltimore Ravens, before Brock Purdy. The blueprint was out. The Kansas City Chiefs wrote the blueprint. Steve Spagnuolo wrote the blueprint. October 23rd, 2022. You might remember that also as Christian McCaffrey's first game. It was the one where 49ers came into the game 3-3, got their asses kicked 44-23 because Steve Spagnuolo had seen in previous games that you could play man-to-man against Deebo Samuel and slow him down. And if you slow down Deebo Samuel, well, there's no 49ers offense for you. And it had taken a while for teams to fully commit to the bit, but that was the trend. And I think we saw it most properly distilled by the Denver Broncos on September 25th, the week 3 game. That was when Jimmy ran out of the back of the end zone. They just played man-to-man. I think it was Vance Joseph was the head coach still, and the defensive coordinator, and he was all over him. He was all over him, and he had them in jail. And then Spagnuolo took it to another level. Now, what the 49ers had done already, knowing that this was happening, seeing that this was happening, and again, with Jimmy as the quarterback, understanding he needed some help there, was go out and get the ultimate man-to-man beater. Because Brandon Ayuk hadn't had his breakout yet. But Christian McCaffrey shows up, and now you want to play man-to-man? That's great. We will feed this man the ball 14 times out of the backfield. And he might be 20 yards down the field by the time we get it to him. But you cannot put a safety or a linebacker on Christian McCaffrey, or you will die by his hand. They obviously had a pretty good run from that point on. Brock comes in, doesn't lose a game until the NFC Championship game. That starts week 13 with Miami. They were 8-4 at that stretch. So they had already been on a 4-game winning streak with Christian McCaffrey, because now there was a counter to the blueprint. The next year, they go 11-1 with McCaffrey. The next year, they go 14-5. So they are now 25-6 over their prior 31 games with Christian McCaffrey going into this season. They're 3-4 now. Because you're right, teams do study. You know what game they usually study first, just because, well, it's the biggest game? The Super Bowl. And we talked about it going in the Chiefs game. I won't bore anyone with the details again, but it was the second or third series of the game. Steve Spagnuolo said, screw this. We're going full man-to-man for the rest of the show. And Christian McCaffrey still had a pretty nice game. Now, he fumbled, but that was on the first series. And he still had a nice game catching the ball out of the backfield. And the Niners were able to, they were in overtime of the Super Bowl. And had they gotten the ball second, who knows? They didn't, but who knows? And everybody, I think, watched that film and saw, oh, wow, Debo can't do it. He can't do it. And Debo is such a fulcrum of their offense. We'll take our chances with McCaffrey out of the backfield and Brandon Ayuk, who is a hit or miss player, and Kittle, who has to protect way more than he probably should because you have a shitty right tackle. We'll take our chances with that instead of the Debo, oh yeah, and plus those guys too going up against zone. It's not as if they're shitty there. But we're going to take out one player in full, and that's Debo Samuel. And their offense is going to struggle, not just with the middle of the field, but everywhere, as they saw when they lost 3 straight games in the middle of the season without Debo. You don't have Debo, it's a release valve that even with Christian McCaffrey, you need. This is a stars and scrubs roster, and the guys behind him, pretty scrubby. So what did we see teams do at the beginning of this season? Now, I don't know what the Jets were doing, so we can't even use that as a blueprint. But week 2, Minnesota, that's the Baltimore model. That's cover the middle of the field. That's exotic blitzes up front. That's forcing the ball out of Brock Purdy's hands. And they played a little bit of man, and they press plenty. But really, that is Brian Flores mixing coverages, disguising coverages, cover 6, palms, quarters, and forcing quarterbacks into quick decisions when they don't have a full diagnosis on what the play is in the defensive backfield, and hoping that they misplay it 3 or 4 times, as Brock did, and that turns into 2 or 3 turnovers, and here's your ball game. So that's separate, though there are some tendencies that are similar. Rams didn't have the personnel, but they played a lot of man-to-man. Arizona, New England did. They definitely don't have the personnel. They were trying to jam the Niners on the line of scrimmage all day, every day, and it didn't work because they're horrendous. But the Arizona game in week 5 told us everything. Jonathan Gannon is a weird cat. There's no question about it. But that dude can coordinate a defense. That guy is going to have a good game plan for his team. Whether his team can execute it or not, a very different story. But defensively, he's going to have his guys in the right spot. And they played man-to-man damn near every snap. And they got burned a couple of times big. You think about Brandon Ayuk running down the sidelines. You think about all this stuff. But they made the bet that if they kept doing it, they had a chance to win the game. Because if they didn't do it, they were going to lose by 30. If you just play zone and let Brock Purdy carve you up, you're going to lose by 30. If you play man-to-man, he might make enough mistakes, and you might make enough plays to where you have a chance. And they did. And they won because the Niners choked it away with some conservative play calling, not adapting to the scheme, because aggression beats man-to-man. And Kyle didn't want to be aggressive when you had the lead. Seattle tried to do it on a short week. They don't have the dudes either. They were trying to mix and match because obviously Baltimore game plan. But now they don't have the pass rush, so they were trying to mix in some man-to-man with the Baltimore stuff that they were running last year. And there were moments when you're like, oh, that's interesting. But ultimately, it was just they're a sieve. And I think that when we get back to, week 11, that might look a lot different. They just made a trade with Baker for Ernest Jones. Like there might be something there in a couple of weeks. I'm worried about that for the 49ers, if that game means anything. But then you get Kansas City, and what's Kansas City do? They're like, what if we just did the Super Bowl game plan from the jump? Now, Debo Samuel's not playing, but you also have Brandon Ayuk, who was not in sync with Brock. You're dealing with Ricky Pearsall, who did get open for the first quarter, and then get this, the guy who's had 3 practices in his NFL career since like early August, got really tired really fast and started getting jammed at the line of scrimmage like nobody's business.
Well, they're great at mucking up the game. They get just enough penetration up front. They get just enough contact at the line. They muck up the receivers as much as they possibly can. And then they have some really, really good players as well. Nick Bolton's really good. Trent McDuffie's really good.
They're a joy to watch.
Has emerged. Jones is a Hall of Famer. I mean, they got some really,
really as well as anybody, Larry. But you think about, okay, so that blueprint, everybody's been copying Kansas City. Kansas City copied Kansas City, and it won handily. So now you look at, well, who could even pull it off? Dallas can't pull it off. I think the world of Mike Zimmer as a defensive coordinator, they don't got the horses. They can't run the race. This is the best possible situation for the 49ers because they'll get way more credit than they deserve for beating the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday because they're called the Dallas Cowboys. They might as well be the Jacksonville Jaguars. There's very little difference between those two.
I don't want to. I don't want to downplay the Cowboys because they got a week of extra rest. So I mean, they're coming out of the bye, and you know what? The Niners are going to get the A game of the Cowboys.
Well, they're
going to get the best game. The Cowboys play better on the road too. I mean,
Cowboys,
this sets up for the Cowboys to play well. I mean, I don't. The Niners are better. Cowboys can't run it. Cowboys can't stop the run.
Correct.
Niners should win this game. If they play it 10 times, Niners are going to win it 8. But Dallas is going to fire in this game.
Name
this is
one
not going to be
player on
Dallas.
the Dallas defense, Larry. Like
what's that?
Who's good on the Dallas defense right now? Parsons isn't going to play, is he?
I know Parsons not going to play. Lawrence isn't going to play. I mean, it's not. I'm just saying that they're going to show up. They're going to play with energy and effort, and I mean, I just think the 49ers are not good enough to take anybody lightly. They're not good enough to try to show up and be in. You're just not beating. I mean, Tim Ryan said it today. You're not beating any NFL team. None of these wins come easy, and you're not going to beat anybody unless you show up and really play.
But
so
I would be
that's
really,
their situation.
I'd be really concerned. The bye week in McCaffrey is going to tell us everything. Now, this season, again, might be over. If you're right about the Cowboys and they come out and the 49ers lay another egg, we're cooked. We're done. Let's not even pretend anymore. But Tampa Bay, I know they're injured as all hell on the offensive side. That defense is still, Todd Bowles is going to have it dialed up now, and Vita Vea is in the middle. And something that Kansas City did that stole from Baltimore this past week was they can move Chris Jones around because they know the offensive line has to key in on Chris Jones. And so what did they do? Well, they brought the pressure opposite the side of Chris Jones because they knew the line was going to slide towards Chris Jones. And honestly, this is where a lot of the protection stuff that I was complaining about earlier in the show showed up, because it's not as if Kansas City's coming, from they're showing blitz. They press the button in Madden. They're telling you it's coming from this direction, and the protection they geared
up. They geared up in this game. They knew the Niners were geared up for Jones, and they used him somewhat as a decoy, and they manipulated him. They knew the Niners were geared up for Kelsey, so they really schemed Noah Gray open, and they went to 2 tight ends.
I mean,
they did a
couple
couple
coordinators
things
for the Niners got worked. They got worked.
Yeah. Oh, no question.